All right, we can try that. So you want to know about German verbs like ask or answer, the German equivalent, how the argument structure works. Okay. I don't have all my notes with me on linking, but we can try together. Okay, so what would be ask would be fragte. Yeah, okay. So these are the double accusative ones. So let's say German fragen. And we'll put the sentence over here. What would it be? Something like Peter fragte den Jungen. And we'll just say etwas. Okay, so the gloss for this is Peter, and this is nominative. It's our subject. Asked. The accusative. Boy. Accusative. Something. And this something is also accusative. So these are these double accusative constructions. Okay, so what would we say? We have ask, fragen would have a what? What would be the argument structure? You have the example sentence there. You have an agent. Yeah, it could be a goal. People sometimes call it a source. I'm not so sure that that is a good name. And then the something would be a theme, right? So this one is not so. What are our other options on the thematic hierarchy? What do we have? Agent, beneficiary. It's not a location. We could call it a patient. Are there any other good options there? Not an instrument. Not usually. Experiencer tends to be for something where really that item undergoes some kind of experience. And here, this boy may not have any, he may not be undergoing any kinds of experience, you know. Peter could be asking him and he's asleep and he doesn't notice, or he's looking at his iPhone and, you know, this action misses him completely. This is one of the reasons why people don't like to write names here. So Joan Bresnan in her book just says X, Y, Z and tries to abstract away from that, okay? You do get into problems like this. I would probably call it a patient. That would be my preferred. Okay, so then let's try to settle on that, and then let's see what this would be. So what would be our linking? Remembering back. What would be our the features that we assign to these? Minus O, I heard whispered. So this would be minus O. Which one would be minus R? The patient would be minus R. And this one would have to be minus R. Okay, now what? Have to look for the hierarchy. Which hierarchy? The subject, object, whatever? This one? Or which one are you referring to? Grammatical roles, yeah, we have the hierarchy. I've put it in that order already. We need to start our mapping principles. What maps to what? The agent would be subject. If the highest role is minus O, it becomes subject. It's mapped to subject. That's unproblematic. Yep.
The theme becomes plus O because of the asymmetric object parameter.
Okay, so what you would like to do is invoke the asymmetric object parameter. Object parameter, which said that something like this cannot exist. But remember that we invoked it for Icelandic, we invoked it for English. I don't know whether it should be invoked for German. I actually haven't done much work on linking in German. But this is a good kind of case to think about whether you want to invoke it. So when we invoked it in English and in Icelandic, one of the arguments was a dative or had this to argument, right? So at least in Icelandic was very clear. One of them was a genitive and the other one was a dative. I forget which, but they were not the same. In German, both of these are accusative. We can try a passive test to see whether they're both really objects. What would be the passive of this? Der Junge wurde etwas von Peter gefragt. That's good. The boy was asked something by Peter. So the boy can become a subject under passivization. How about the other one? Etwas wurde den Jungen von Peter gefragt. No? I'm seeing shakes. Who can say? Den Jungen wurde etwas von Peter gefragt. How's that? Who likes the sentence? Nobody? None of you? Okay. Yeah, the native speakers. We have plenty of native speakers there. Okay. Yes? It's invalid, so you don't think this can be subject. Okay. If that is the case, den Jungen wurde etwas von Peter gefragt, you don't like. Sure? Okay, then we have to say that this is the real object. Okay, we want this to be the real object. And this will be some kind of secondary object. Yeah. Okay, so then in that case, we want to invoke the asymmetric object parameter and say one of these gets to be plus O. And then just like in, if I remember right, in Icelandic and English, this one will then be plus O, the lowest one. And then we can link this to object. And we can link this to object theta. So that would work out, I think. Okay? But those are exactly the kinds of examples you should be looking at, so that's a good thing to think about. See if the linking theory actually works for those kinds of examples. Yeah?
So passivization is the usual test?
Passivization is generally a good test to test for which, if you have two objects, which one of those is the object.
Are there any other tests?
Yes. You'll have to go back to look at Mary Dalrymple's book. She lists a number. Some languages have object agreement as well. Some languages are very, very strict about case. So the object has to have this case.
But for English, it's usually...
For English, it's usually the passivization test. Okay, other questions? Yeah.
But isn't the primary object in English always the one after directly after the verb?
Yes. So
The way LFG sees it.
so the question is, isn't the object, the primary object in LFG, always the one after the verb? And that's the way LFG sees it. So LFG says verb, and this other NP, this will be the object. Other frameworks treat it slightly differently, but the reason LFG does it this way is because of the passivization test, okay? Because you say, okay, that test is really showing us whatever the primary object is can be passivized, not the other thing. And then once you've established that, you can say, okay, now there's two things we can look at, but it is because of the passivization test. Okay, other questions on linking? Okay, so then we will continue on today with new topics. So last time we looked at adjuncts, and I briefly introduced you to how to do adjectives and also adverbs. And today we'll do PPs, prepositional phrases or postpositional phrases. And these PPs are quite complicated creatures because they are multifunctional. Prepositions are multifunctional. So what I'll try to do today is give you an overview of what you can see with them and the LFG analyses of these. And these are analyses that actually we developed, and that's why the Grammar Writer's Cookbook is the reading for this in here. They are older analyses of prepositional phrases in the 1982 book, but we've gone further than that. Okay, so what do we know about PPs? First, some general things. So typical PP would be something like in the garden. Okay, so what we have is a preposition and some kind of noun phrase. And this is the prepositional phrase. The way you can think about PPs, about prepositions, though, is that they usually relate a figure with some kind of a ground. Okay, so if you had something like Peter sat in the garden, the way people think about prepositions often is to say, here's my preposition. And then it relates a figure to a ground. What would be the figure? What would be the ground? It's a very intuitive definition. No clue? This would be the ground, and this would be the figure. So the idea is that you have some figure that you're talking about, Peter, and you're situating him with respect to a certain ground. Okay, so semantically, prepositions are two-place relations. Yeah, they always connect two things. Syntactically, though, prepositions are one-place relationships. Okay, so syntax, it's a one-place relationship. Because and I'll talk about this, it governs an NP. We'll talk about what governs means in this context. And semantically, it's a two-place relationship. And it relates a figure to a ground. Now I've used this word governs, and in syntax in general, you like to talk about a verb governs. This is a term from Chomsky, but it's arguments. I haven't used this term before. But basically what does this mean? Well, it says how many there are, 1, 2, or 3, what type, so agents, patients, etc. And to some extent, what case. Okay, nominative, accusative. Though these two things tend to be related in many, many languages. Well, they tend to be related, although the relationship is not one-to-one. Okay, so a verb says, how many arguments do I have, what type of arguments there are, and then something about case marking as well. And similarly, what a preposition does, well, it only ever syntactically governs one argument. So it doesn't say how many, it's always just one. But it also talks about what type. Okay, and the space of possibilities is not as large as with verbs, but it still has something to say about it. So, for example, German is nice in this case because it still has case. So we have some German examples. Let's take Petra. This means Petra goes in the accusative garden. This means Petra is going into the garden. Versus Petra geht in dem Garten. You would also, in German, you put in and dem together to im. It doesn't matter for my purposes. Petra goes in the dative garden. And what does this mean, German speakers? Yeah. Yeah, Petra is walking around in the garden, basically. Yeah. walking in the garden. So Petra's walking around in the garden. Okay, this kind of dative-accusative alternation is systematic in German with verbs of motion. Okay, you can say it with swim. Sie schwimmt im See versus sie schwimmt in den See. So she swims into the lake versus she's swimming around in the lake. So you can see there's something semantic going on. And it's telling you something about this is a location where she's already at, and now she's doing her movement there, whereas this is a goal in a sense. She's trying to go there. Okay. So what in does, in says, well, either I can have an accusative, NP, and then this is directional, or I can have a dative NP, and in this case it's locational. So this is a fairly nice example of how prepositions are a bit like verbs, right? They're telling you something about the role of this NP, and they're telling you something about case marking. Okay, now there's some prepositions in German that allow only a certain type of case marking. Wegen, because, takes what? There's actually historical change going on. Dative? Genitive, yeah. Wegen der Sache, because of that thing. This is the feminine genitive thing. Okay, so wegen historically takes a genitive. But more recently, it's also begun to take a dative case. Yeah. And that's the subject of newspaper articles, how German language is going to the dogs and things like that. It's a very normal historical process. The genitive and the dative, they tend to be very closely related and tend to switch off historically. Okay, but so the idea is that preposition governs some NP and has something to say about it. So how do we actually do that then in LFG? So let's do one of these. So first the C structure, just to get it out of the way. What would we want as a C structure? Maybe something like this. NP Peter. Geht. And then a VP, which doesn't have a verb in it, strangely. Okay, this is a C structure according to what Mary Dalrymple has in her book. Okay, so if you have a finite verb, it gets instantiated in I. Okay, and if there's no other verbs, so the VP doesn't have anything in there. If we had something like ist gegangen, has gone, then it would be here, and then we would have a VP, another verb over here. So Peter goes in the garden. If it's just a finite verb, we just have it in I and no V under the VP. If we actually have an auxiliary, ist, is, ist in den Garten, and then we have a participle, went. So then we would have a V, yes. And I put this on deliberately because we've had C structures, but I find this confusing, and I'm sure you find it confusing too. Yes. Yeah.
I still get why the get is in there. I get why is gegangen is in there because it's an auxiliary, and we did get before in the
Yeah.
I bar
Yeah.
position, but we didn't do that for the other verbs.
We didn't do that for the other verbs in German or in general. In English?
In the last
Yeah.
example.
We kept it simple and left it under VP.
In the VP, yeah, okay. So, but this, okay, so so the other option would be to do this and set and say NP VP, and then it would be geht here. And then there would be a PP. And then have nothing here. Okay, and that's how we ended up doing it for English. Yeah. There is a good reason to do it this way for German, and that is it's actually very difficult to do German syntax in this kind of tree. Because the way German syntax actually works is that you have something called a Vorfeld, which is basically all the material before the finite verb, the finite element, verb or auxiliary. Then you have something called a Mittelfeld, which has all kinds of arguments, etc., etc., etc. And then you actually have the verb. And then you can have stuff in the Nachfeld. Okay, this is the way German syntax actually works. And people have shown this over and over and over again in German. So for German syntax, this position here is actually very, very important. You can have things before it and things after it, and this position here is very important as well, this non-finite one. So therefore, it's actually a good reason to put the finite thing here, because you can say everything up here, everything before it is in the Vorfeld, and everything that's basically in the VP is the Mittelfeld. I can go into this more if you want me to. Do you? Yes? Yeah. Okay, so let me try showing, I'm trying to get a nice complicated sentence that's not too complicated. So this is in the accusative garden has Peter the accusative dog yesterday sent which misbehaved was. So Peter sent the dog into the garden, the dog who was misbehaved into the garden, okay? So the point is that this thing here is the Vorfeld, And you can put, in principle, any constituent here. I've put the prepositional phrase here. But I could put this one here. I could say, den Hund hat Peter gestern in den Garten geschickt, der ungezogen war. It's a bit odd because the relative clause is here. It's modifying dog, then it's very far away, but could work. Or I could put Peter up there. Peter hat in den Garten gestern den Hund geschickt, der ungezogen war. Yeah. This relative clause makes it difficult. I can put gestern up there. Gestern hat Peter den Hund in den Garten geschickt, der ungezogen war. Yeah. So, but I need to know where to put it. I can also put several things here. And here I can have these things here in the Mittelfeld. I can have in the middle field, I can have them in any order. There's some restrictions, but I can have them in any order. I can switch these around. Den Hund Peter gestern, I can switch all these around, these three things. And then I have something which is extraposed, and this is usually called the Nachfeld. Okay, so purely descriptively, this is how German syntax works. You have one position before the finite verb, you have stuff in the middle where you can scramble happily, and you can have stuff after the non-finite verb. So if you look at German syntax again and again and again, you realize that this position is important. And that translates into people who are doing syntax and are trying to take this picture and stick it into a tree. It's not easy for German. It really is not easy. And people do all kinds of weird stuff in order to make this work. But I think everybody would agree that this position is special, and therefore you want this to be up there. Yeah. And those are the kinds of design decisions you have to think about with trees. Questions about this? Yeah.
When you have prepositions with different case options, would you analyze it as one preposition, so having multiple options, or as multiple prepositions and selecting one case?
Okay, so you're now going to the next step. So you're saying, getting back to prepositions, leaving German syntax behind, getting back to prepositions in general. If I have several options like this, would I have several lexical entries? Or would I have one preposition with a disjunction? I would go for one preposition with a disjunction saying I can be accusative with this reading or locational with this reading, just like I've written it here. Because in this case, in really has a core meaning that is the same. You're locating a figure in a ground. Yeah. And then whether the figure just got there or whether it's already there is a special thing. So I would do one lexical entry with disjunctions. Okay, so now, tree, okay? I'm not much of a tree person, so any tree that you draw that's reasonable, that's not completely strange looking, is fine with me. I'm more of an F structure person. That's where a lot more of the action happens in LFG. So now let's try to do this one in F structure. So the first part should be easy for you. What's the head? Geht, yeah, go. So that would be gehen. And what does it have? A subject. Yeah, a subject.
How do you say that something is optional?
You don't say anything about it. Yeah. So in this case, we think that in dem Garten is an adjunct, right? So let's treat it that way. Okay, then we have a subject. and that is pred Petra. And we know things about Petra. She is nominative, and she is third person, and she is singular, and she is female, feminine. Yeah, that's what we know about Petra for sure. Okay, and then we've decided to say in the garden is an adjunct, because we can have several of these, right? Sie geht in den Garten, unter den Baum, under the tree, whatever, whatever. So it's going to be an adjunct. And adjuncts geht in den Garten. I'll add one on here. So we can do two. Unter den Baum. Under the accusative tree. So how did we do adjuncts? With a set notation, and the set notation is this curly bracket in LFG. And then in the set we can have several things. Actually, I'm getting over optimistic about how much space I need, how little space I need. Okay, so let's start with one. Okay, this is the part that you don't know yet. This is what it will look like. We will say pred in, and in takes an object. Okay, so this is where prepositions are being treated like verbs, except that they don't have a subject and an object. What LFG thinks is you call this the object, okay, because it's the internal argument in a sense. So if you think about this, Petra goes in the garden, is walking in the garden. Remember, this one is relating Petra with garden. Okay, so in a sense, this is the subject of the preposition, in a sense, and this is the object of the preposition. And that's why it's called an object. You can fight about these labels, etc. But in general, in the LFG analyses, this is treated as the object of the preposition. And in the descriptive literature on grammar, you will see it referred to as that as well. Okay, so then we can say, okay, what is the object? The object is pred garden. And then all the usual things. What do we know about garden in German? It's case accusative. In that case, it is number singular. It is person 3. And if we want to add under the tree, we can add another member of this set. Same schema. Pred tree, no, what's it in German? Baum. And same things, we know it's case accusative, number singular, person 3, and I've left out gender, but we'll just deal without gender. Tense present, whatever else we might need there. Okay, does that make sense? Yeah. So we have adjuncts. We can have any number of adjuncts. They're part of a set. There and there. And you have prepositions, which function as the head, as the main predicate in an F structure, and they subcategorize for an argument as well. And as part of subcategorizing for that argument, they can specify case, and they can specify what kinds of semantics go with that. Okay, so that is your basic standard preposition and your basic standard analysis. Now we're going to move, last chance before I erase this, if you want to ask any more questions. Now we're going to move on to some other types. I'll go back to English. So we have examples like he sits on this book. It's not what you're supposed to do with books, but hey, he relies on this book. Okay, so now you can look at these sentences and think about it a little bit, about what the difference is here. In the German, I'll put in, for those of you who speak German, I'll put this German example there too. Wartet. Okay, so these are wartet auf dem Buch, again a very odd thing. He waits on the dative book. Okay, so he's on the book and he's waiting on it. Locational reading. He waits on the accusative book. And this in English means he is waiting for the book. So this is, he is waiting on the book, which you shouldn't do. You can go stand somewhere else. And same here. Okay, so there's clearly a difference between how these prepositions are being used, right? They look exactly the same, but they're giving rise to different readings. So the way we have classified these is we've said this is the semantic use. By semantic meaning a spatial use, meaning really figure ground. Yeah? You're relating two things in the way we saw before. You're on something, you're in something, whatever. And this we classified as a non-semantic use. And by this we mean that it's not being used in its original spatial meaning anymore. Okay, whatever its meaning, maybe it used to mean really on, but relies on is really, it means something quite different, and waiting for means something different. Yeah, then. So it's not a spatial use. So now we have prepositions. They can be either semantic, that would be a spatial use, a multi-spatial use. And we can have non-semantic. And these would be these wartet auf or relies on. And then there is there's another problem, which is, okay, yeah. Let me check what the examples were. So we have an adjunct analysis for the semantic ones. Let's do the non-semantic ones. What we generally do in this case is we think of these as an oblique or some kind of object. Okay? Because these non-semantic ones are used in a sense like case markers are in other languages. So you just say then this is an argument of that verb. Okay, so let me try that again. I always get messed up at this point. So these ones we decided were adjuncts. Yeah? These ones are not adjuncts, because if you just say he relies, that's not good. Yeah? Or if you say wartet auf, you want to know something. So these are treated as arguments of some type. And these, we've treated as adjuncts. So for the non-semantic ones, for these ones we've said, okay, these are adjuncts. And for the non-semantic ones, we say arguments. And they could be object, mainly some kind of object. The oblique. Yeah, so these will be some kind of object. Because this verb really wants two things. And this is a non-semantic use, so we're not going to be able to do that, to do this kind of stuff. So then let's try to write an F structure for this. Book. So let's do the F structure, just so you can see them both. So we'll have a main predicate that is rely, and it'll have a subject and an object. And the subject will be some pronoun, number singular, person 3, gender masculine, case nominative, and then you will have an object in which you have a pred, book, and you will have a number singular, person 3, gender, books don't have gender in English, and you will have something that might be called a p case, which would be on. Okay, in some places you see it as P case, in some places you see it as P form. I think in the cookbook we use P form, but in some papers you'll also see it as P case. So the idea is that this is acting as case in a sense. Yeah. For those of you who know Romance languages, the a in Romance languages, I give something to somebody, this a used to be a preposition, right? But now it's working like a case marker for objects and indirect objects. So that's the idea behind this, that you have prepositions that are able to start acting like case markers. And you see that in language after language after language. And so this is the situation where you have this on. It can be used as a spatial, as a really semantic preposition, but it's also being used as something like a case marker. That's the idea here. And in this case then, because it's not semantic, you don't have it as a head. Okay, so what we also add in the grammars that we've done is we've usually said something like P-type is sem, just to distinguish it again. P-type is sem. And here we would say P-type is non-semantic. You already see that because it doesn't have a pred value here, but it reminds you of it again. Yep.
If we have verb particles, will you be treating them the same?
No. So the question here is, what about verb particles? That's what I was just thinking about, when to say something about verb particles. So verb particles will not be treated the same, but I think what I will show you now is I will put on the computer and I'll show you analyses on the from the website, because that's easier to understand than me putting in more and more F structures. And then you can also see that you can go home and call up these F structures on your own. So you'll just have to write down which sentences I parse, and then you can go through it. Other questions directly to this?
So for English, we could say that all phrasal verbs work like this?
No, the phrasal verbs are going to be different. So things like call up, I called you up, those work differently.
Okay.
And why is that? Okay, so maybe I should say something about that. Okay, I'm going to make this go away. So in both English and German, you also confusingly have something that people have called, you just call them phrasal verbs. Or people also call it particle verbs. What did you just call it?
Verb particles.
Verb particles, okay. Verb particles. And the standard examples of this are things like he called her up. Okay, where you have this up here, which looks exactly like a preposition, but in this case is a particle. And the idea is that in this case you actually have a verb that is call up. So how can you tell particles from these types of things? It's very difficult to do. But one thing you can try is you can say, can you say he relies this book on? No, you can't say that. So one thing is are they separable actually? So is this actually a PP constituent? In this case, this is a PP constituent. In this case, there isn't even an NP here. Yeah. The German equivalent for this would be anrufen. In German, you have them in the verb, but you can separate them out. So this is another category. And I won't draw the F structure for this. I'll show it to you on the computer. So what we also have here is then, and here I would actually make a different category. I would say particle. Part of verb, but separable. You can say a lot about these particles. We have a PhD student right now here at the department who's writing his dissertation on Italian particle verbs in LFG. There have been several LFG treatments of particle verbs in Hungarian, yeah, and German, Hungarian, German, and a little bit in English. So if you're interested in this, this is a place where there is discussion and debate going on how to treat them best. So that is also one area you could think about for your projects or your presentations, term papers or presentations. So there's a lot going on here. And they look the same as this. They're often the same linguistic material, but they work differently. So that's also confusing. Questions? Okay, so now let's try to turn this on. See how this works. So the reason I'm doing this on the web is to remind you that you can do this at home in the privacy of your whatever, computer. Okay, we'll just have to wait for this to arrive. Okay, so this website is linked via my teaching website, but you can also go to it if you just type in, should be in the internet. If you type in Ines XLE, there. Oh, come on. So if you type that into your browser, and it really wants me to read the newspaper, okay, then you should be able to get something like this, the XLE-Web Interface, University of Bergen, okay. You can click on that and you get a site that looks like this, and you get a whole bunch of grammars, and we're going to play with the English one. The German one is pretty good as well, but we're going to play with the English one, and I'll just show you some examples. So if you're going through your notes and you're thinking, oh, I can't understand what was written on the board, or I can't read my own writing, then what you could do is you could go into something like this and say, the tiger ate the bone in the garden. Let's see what this looks like. And you can say parse sentence. And then it gives you several possibilities, and now you sort of have to know which one you want. So we want the one where in the garden is an adjunct of eat. Is it giving me the right thing? Now, for some reason, it's not giving me the right thing. And I even tried it out at home. I want this one. Yes, okay. So I want this one where the adjunct is at the verb level. And here's the C structure. This is a grammar engineering C structure, so it's not the theoretical, it's theoretically motivated, but not like in Mary Dalrymple's book. So we just have S, we didn't do with IPs and stuff like that in grammar engineering. But the main part here is the F structure, where you have as eat, subject, object. Subject is the tiger. Object is the bone. And then we have an adjunct. Okay, and this should look pretty much like what I drew on the board. It's a bit more detailed than what I had, but it should look pretty much like that. So we have pred, in, being the main predicate, taking an object garden. Here's the object. Here's what we know about the object. Many more details than I've been writing on the board. And then in addition, we have the information that it's a semantic type of preposition. And we also have some information. This information is not necessarily reliable, but the grammar tries to say it's locational. In this case, it's correct. Yeah. Okay. So this is what we had on the board for that thing. Okay. Now, how about the tiger gave a bone to his friend. Okay, just one structure. He gave a bone to his friend, PP. We have give as the main predicate. Tiger is the subject, bone is the object, and then we have an oblique. This is a case we haven't seen yet. I haven't put this case on the board. But what you can see here is that, well, we can talk about why it's an oblique. Inside, this looks just like the adjunct case we just had. Okay, we have a to, a semantic preposition, P-type sem. It's directional in this case, that's correct as well. And this to takes an object, which is friend. And there's various things we know about the friend, also that it's specified by a possessive, that is he, etc. Okay. So the difference to what we had before is that it said adjunct here. Adjunct. And this was a curly bracket. So why is this an oblique in this case? It's a semantic preposition. There's a spatial meaning in some sense. You're giving some objects is being transferred from here to there, so it's considered to be semantic still. Yeah. But why is it now an oblique instead of an adjunct, as we saw for in the garden? Yeah. Yeah, so give is, so the to his friend is an argument of give. So it can't be an adjunct, right? But it's still a semantic preposition, and at least for English, if you have a semantic preposition that is an argument, then you use it as an oblique. I should make this blue to keep it the same. Okay, so it's semantic, has a mostly generally a spatial use, but you can have either adjunct or you have an oblique, and in this case it has to be an argument of verb. And that actually completes the picture. Okay, it's pretty complicated, but this is it as far as I know. You have a preposition that can be either semantic or non-semantic. If it's semantic, you have two further options. It can be an adjunct, as in he ran in the garden, or it can be an oblique, as in gave something to. In the non-semantic case, you actually only have the argument option. It doesn't make any sense to have the adjunct option. And there it's generally, at least in English, treated like an object. Okay, so what are the sentences you have to write down to try at home? The tiger ate a bone in the garden. The tiger gave a bone to his friend. And now we'll try on something. We'll try something else. We'll try the tiger relied on his friend. Parse sentence. We have our C structure. Is this right? No, this is actually giving you the... Okay, so what this is doing here, it's saying we have rely on it, but it's actually put on in there as well to say it's part of the verb, which makes sense, I guess. And it says rely on has two arguments, the subject tiger, the object his friend. And in this case, we don't register the preposition. We just say we know there's a preposition there. Its P form is on, and we know it's non-semantic. Okay? So you don't get this pred on and it has an object, because in this case it's just considered to be an object of the verb. But you can see in terms of the C structure, it's always just PP. Well, in this case it's called PP case because it's anticipating that it's non-semantic, but you always have a P and an NP. Questions about that? No? So this is case number 3. That's this one. Now let's try this one, case number 4. The tiger, no, that's the wrong one. This is ours. The tiger called up his friend, called his friend up. The tiger called his friend up. Okay, let's try that. Okay, now we have lots of things. We want up as a particle, and here we go. So what do we have here? We don't have a prepositional phrase. We have up being parsed as a particle. Okay, so in this case it's being given a separate lexical entry. We have up here the verb call up being put together as a particle verb. Looks like relied on in the previous one. Call up has two arguments, a subject, tiger, and object friend. Let's look at the object. In this case, it's the main predicate is friend, and here's the his. And we have no information about any prepositions, okay, because this is considered to be a particle verb. What we do have is here, we have this information here that says particle verb form up. That's registered. Yeah. This is a grammar engineering output. In grammar engineering, we found that it's better to have more information than less information. We have the information that up is here, but we just give you the extra information that it's in fact a particle, not a preposition. So it's very easy to find that information. Okay, so that was case number 4. Yeah, this is a confusing part of grammar because they all look similar. Yeah. These are similar in that they both have semantic prepositions, but you have the distinction adjuncts versus obliques. These ones look similar because they're both arguments, but you have semantic prepositions versus non-semantic ones. So here they get a predicate, and in the other one they don't. Okay, so P has a pred value. P no pred value. And then these two again look fairly similar because the P has no pred value, but in this case the particle is really part of the verb. Yeah, and it's not registered as a preposition, it's separable, so there's no PP. And in this case it's part of it is considered to be part of the verb as well in some sense, but there's still a PP that you have. So they each differ from each other slightly. And figuring them out is tricky linguistic analysis. But this seems to be the space that there is. So we have a little bit of time. So when you go home and try this, and you say parse sentence, again, this is a big grammar for English. It allows for many, many possibilities. What this discriminants here tells you, it says there's two solutions and then some more. Which ones do you want? Okay, and you can either look through all of them, or you can say, well, in this case, I'm interested in the structure, and you have to learn how to read this a little bit, where up is a particle. And then you click on that, and you get up as a particle. If I click on the other one, apparently I can go back by doing this. If I say, okay, let's see what up as an adjective is like. What do I get there? I say the tiger called his friend up. Oh, that's right. So this is like the tiger called his friend stupid. Yep. So up can apparently also be an adjective. You up. Okay, so that's not the one I was trying to illustrate, but you can, so if you can click on these and play around with them and see what kinds of stuff you get. So generally, if there's more solutions than one, you have to first see which one you want. So in this case, I wanted the part one. I clicked on that and it showed me that. And if I say, no, this is not the right one, I can click on this again and go back and try another one. Okay, and when they show you all the possibilities, they give them to you in what is called a packed F structure. So this says there's one version, A1, where we have call tiger up, this is the adjective version, versus call up, the particle version. Okay, and you can click on these as well. Can you? Here's A1. So I can click on that as well, and then I get that one. It's just expanding. Anyway, so you can play with it, but that was just the basics you need to know. So you can go home and play with these or other structures as well. Hungarian is not on there. There should be a Hungarian grammar. I can maybe write to those people and say, where's your grammar? And Urdu's not there. Urdu's not on there because it's not clean enough yet to be on there. And that might be the Hungarian problem too. I mean, this is available to anybody, so you don't want to put a grammar on that will make too many mistakes. You hope to clean it first and then put it on. Okay, so I'm done with my material for today. You can ask me more about this. You can ask me more about prepositions. The next thing we do is complementizer phrases, CPs. That'll be a completely different subject, so I don't want to start it today. But do go home and play with this. It's helpful for other kinds of things as well. Okay, then we're done.